On October 3, 1849, a man was found lying in the gutter on Lombard Street in Baltimore, Maryland. He was delirious, barely conscious, wearing clothes that did not belong to him. He was taken to Washington College Hospital. He never regained full consciousness. He died 4 days later. On October 7, 1849, his last words were spoken in the early hours of the morning to a nurse sitting beside his bed. He repeated one name over and over for hours: Reynolds. Reynolds. Nobody knows who Reynolds was. Nobody knows what happened to this man in the 4 days between when he was last seen and when he was found in that gutter. Nobody knows why he was wearing someone else's clothes. Nobody knows how he died. The death certificate listed the cause of death as phrenitis, inflammation of the brain, which in 1849 was what doctors wrote when they did not know what killed someone. The man who died in that Baltimore hospital bed, muttering a name nobody recognized, wearing clothes nobody could identify, after 4 missing days nobody could explain, was Edgar Allan Poe, the most important horror writer in the history of American literature, the man who invented the modern detective story, the psychological thriller, the unreliable narrator, the gothic short story. He invented all of it, and then he died in a Baltimore gutter in someone else's clothes after 4 days that have never been explained in 175 years. If that is not a horror story, I do not know what is. But Edgar Allan Poe is not the only horror Baltimore is hiding. Baltimore, Maryland, a city of crabs and harbor views and beautiful Federal Hill sunsets, and the most passionate football fans in America. And underneath all of that, one of the darkest, most haunted histories of any city on the East Coast. Today, we go inside the 3 most haunted places in Baltimore, Maryland. Places where the darkness that Edgar Allan Poe wrote about turned out to be less fictional than anyone was comfortable admitting. Keep the lights on. We are going in. Place number 1, 203 West Fayette Street, Westminster Hall and Burying Ground. This is where Edgar Allan Poe is buried, or at least this is where his body is. Whether the rest of him ever truly left is a question Baltimore has been asking for 175 years. Poe came to Baltimore as a young man before he became famous. He lived here in poverty. He wrote here. He struggled here. He fell in love here. He married his cousin Virginia here when she was 13 years old and he was 27. Virginia died of tuberculosis in 1847. 2 years later, Poe was dead too, in that gutter, in those clothes. After those 4 missing days, he was buried in Westminster Burying Ground. And then something started happening at his grave that has continued for over a century. Every year, on January 19th, Poe's birthday, in the middle of the night, a figure dressed entirely in black, with a wide-brimmed black hat and a white scarf, approaches Poe's grave. They kneel. They place 3 red roses on the grave in a specific arrangement, and they leave a half-empty bottle of cognac, and then they disappear into the night. Nobody knows who this person is. This has been happening since at least 1949, possibly longer. Witnesses have tried to photograph the figure. Cameras malfunction. Witnesses have tried to follow the figure. They lose them in the darkness of the cemetery. Every single time, the figure became known as the Poe Toaster. In 2009, the visits stopped. And then in 2016, a new Poe Toaster appeared. Same black clothes, same wide-brimmed hat, same 3 red roses, same cognac. Whether the original toaster died and was replaced, or whether it was always something other than human making those visits, nobody can say. But the grave of Edgar Allan Poe does not feel like other graves. People who visit Westminster Burying Ground report a specific experience at Poe's grave that they do not report anywhere else. The feeling that someone is reading over their shoulder, not watching, reading, like something standing behind you is reading the inscription on the grave marker. and is not satisfied with what it says. Because what it says does not explain what happened. And whatever is standing at that grave has been waiting 175 years for someone to explain what happened. Reynolds. We still do not know who Reynolds was, and neither does Poe, and that is why he cannot leave. Place number 2, Druid Ridge Cemetery, 7900 Park Heights Avenue, just outside Baltimore. The Black Aggie. This story begins with a stolen copy of a famous statue. In 1905, a man named General Felix Agnes commissioned a copy of the famous Adams Memorial statue in Washington, D.C. The original Adams Memorial was created by sculptor Augustus St. Gaudens to mark the grave of Marion Hooper Adams, who had died by suicide in 1884. The original statue is considered one of the most haunting pieces of sculpture ever created in America. A seated figure, gender ambiguous, face partially covered, expression impossible to read. St. Gaudens called it the mystery of the human face. General Agnes had an unauthorized copy made and placed in Druid Ridge Cemetery over his family plot. The copy was darker than the original. Cast in a different metal, the face came out different, more severe, more present. The Black Aggie. And then things started happening. The stories began almost immediately after the statue was installed. The eyes of the Black Aggie glow red at night. Not reflected light, not trick of moonlight, red from within. The dead buried in the surrounding graves rise to gather at the feet of the Black Aggie. At midnight, people who meet the gaze of the Black Aggie go blind, temporarily but completely. Pregnant women who pass beneath the shadow of the statue miscarry. People who spend the night sitting in the lap of the Black Aggie as an initiation. He did not survive until morning. He died of cardiac arrest. The official explanation was that he had an undiagnosed heart condition. He was 19 years old. After decades of incidents, vandalism, and the deaths of several people within the immediate vicinity of the statue, the Agnes family donated the Black Aggie to the Smithsonian Institution in 1967. The Smithsonian accepted the statue and then put it in the basement because of what happened to the staff members who worked near it. The statue currently sits in the courtyard of the Dolly Madison House in Washington, D.C., but Druid Ridge Cemetery, where it stood for 60 years, still carries what it left behind. Visitors to the cemetery report seeing a seated shadow figure in the area where the statue stood. No statue is there, but the shadow sits every night in a space where the Black Aggie spent 60 years doing whatever the Black Aggie was doing, whatever that was. Nobody who found out lived to fully describe it. And place number 3, 801 East Fayette Street, the Baltimore Shot Tower, built in 1828, 230 feet tall, entirely of brick, by hand. It was used to manufacture lead shot for firearms. The process was simple and brutal. Molten lead was poured from the top of the tower through a sieve. As the lead fell 230 feet through the air inside the tower, it formed into perfect spheres. It hit a water basin at the bottom and became ammunition. Millions of rounds of ammunition were made in this tower, every single one of them designed to kill something. The tower operated for decades. Workers climbed the interior brick staircase every single day, carrying molten lead to the top of the tower. In extreme heat, in extreme danger, with no safety equipment, no protections, no regulations, workers died in this tower. Some fell, some were burned, some simply stopped coming back to work and were never accounted for. The records from this period are incomplete. The number of workers who died in or around this tower during its operation is not fully known and has never been fully known. The tower was decommissioned in 1892. It has stood empty since then, but not quiet. Park rangers who monitor the Shot Tower historic site report sounds from inside the tower on quiet nights. Footsteps on the interior stairs. Heavy footsteps, slow footsteps. The footsteps of someone carrying something heavy. Up 230 feet of brick stairs. The way a worker would climb. The way a worker did climb. Every day, for decades, carrying molten death to the top of the tower. Visitors standing at the base of the tower and looking up through the open center report seeing something at the very top of the tower looking back down. Not always, but often enough that it has been reported by multiple independent visitors over multiple years. Something at the top looking down. In a tower that has been locked and empty since 1892. Children who visit the site on school field trips have been documented pointing at the interior of the tower and asking their teachers who that man is. On the stairs, the teachers see nothing. The children insist there is a man on the stairs. He is carrying something. He looks very tired. He looks like he has been climbing those stairs for a very long time and does not know how to stop. 3 places. A grave in a Baltimore cemetery where a man in black has been leaving roses and cognac every January since before anyone alive can remember. And where something stands behind you when you visit and reads the grave marker and is not satisfied with what it says. A cemetery outside Baltimore where a dark statue with glowing red eyes was removed after 60 years because of the deaths and the incidents and the things nobody could explain. And where the shadow of the statue still sits in the space where it stood every single night, even though the statue has been gone for 60 years. And a 230-foot brick tower on Fayette Street where workers carried molten lead to their deaths for decades, and where something is still climbing those stairs, still carrying that weight, still doing that job that nobody told them was finished. 130 years ago, Baltimore, Maryland, the city that produced Edgar Allan Poe, the man who looked into the darkest parts of the human experience and wrote about them so accurately, so precisely, so terrifyingly that people wondered how he knew. How did he know what it felt like to be buried alive? How did he know what it felt like to be driven mad by something only you could hear? How did he know what waited in the darkness beyond the edge of what humans are supposed to see? Maybe he knew because Baltimore showed him. Maybe Baltimore showed him everything and then took him back in a gutter, in someone else's clothes. After 4 days nobody can explain, saying one name over and over until he stopped. Reynolds. We still do not know who Reynolds was, but I think Poe did. At the end, I think he knew exactly who Reynolds was and what Reynolds was, and that is what terrified him most. Drop a comment right now. Would you visit Westminster Burying Ground on January 19th and wait for the Poe toaster to appear at midnight? Would you sit in the space where the Black Aggie stood at Druid Ridge Cemetery after dark? Would you climb the stairs of the Baltimore Shot Tower alone at night and find out which is at the top? Tell me which one. One night, no phone, no lights. Which one? Subscribe right now because video 8 is coming. And it goes to a place where what happened makes everything we have covered in 7 videos look like a bedtime story for children. The darkest video yet is still ahead. You have been warned 7 times now. Reynolds.